Hello, boils and ghouls. It's your old pal, John Kassir, the voice of the Crypt Keeper. And I want to welcome my good fiends of the Horror Heals podcast. Is horror good for mental wellness? But of course it is. I delight in the delicious deaths of pitiful people on the silver screen. So get ready for a hell of a good time with my new fiends, Corey and Kendall, on the Horror Heals podcast.
Hey, Horror Heliacs, welcome back. I'm Corey, here with Kendall, and today's guest, Audrey Rose, brings us on a fantastic voyage into horror, art, and the healing power of embracing your own uniqueness. Audrey is an art teacher who turns her classroom into a world of monsters, filled with more than 150 Frankenstein pieces and tons of Halloween decor. She's here to share how horror, from The Exorcist to Stephen King novels, has been a lifeline for her and her students, especially those who may feel like misfits. We're going to explore the personal side of horror and how characters like Frankenstein's monster resonate with those who feel misunderstood, while we also dive into Audrey's experience using horror to process her own struggles with anxiety and depression. Whether you're an artist, a horror fan, or just someone who's looking for a space where it's okay to feel a little weird, this episode is for you. Horror can be more than just thrills. It's a path toward self-discovery and finding others who get you. Audrey, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Before we get into your specific story, Kendall and I both want to share our appreciation for not just teachers in general, but especially those who dedicate themselves to the arts, the fine arts, and the performing arts. I think Kendall and I are both products of the public school system, but I think because we were both passionate about the arts in school has helped us continue to thrive in our careers. And so thank you for doing that.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much.
What drew you to education and specifically art education?
I've just always loved art. And I just really love sharing my love for art. When I first got into it, like in college, I really just, it's like my calling. Like I was just immediately good at it. There's a lot of things in my life I'm not super confident about, but that is one of them for sure. I just love it. And I love creating a safe place for my kids at school and just making it like a relaxing part of their day. I play music and we just joke and fun about art and do art, and I have the best job ever. Like I love my job. I get to go to school, I get to go to work and just talk about art all day. I don't feel like it's a job. During the summer, I actually get sad because I'm not at school.
You just made me think of my ninth grade was the last time I took an art class for a grade. And aside from art appreciation in college, which I mean was interesting, but completely different, right? You weren't creating. But so shout out to Mr. Kirksey, who was my ninth grade art teacher. And it was funny. He was so, like you just described your classroom, he was very connected to us students. And I remember when he would stop and say, "Oh yeah, I've got to give you kids grades on something." You know what I mean? Like, because he was just so interested in our expression of whatever we were doing.
Yeah.
And I was one of the least talented kids in the class for sure, but he was so supportive and just made you feel good about whatever little tiny talent you might have.
Yeah, for me, I grade on effort and skill. I try to tell them because a lot of kids, they don't even want to start trying because they'll look at like peers, and maybe their peers have been doing art since they were in kindergarten versus the last time these kids did art was in kindergarten. But I also do teach an art history class, which is really fun to see the kids like, "Oh, I didn't even pick this class." And at the end of the year, they're like, "This is my favorite class," because you're just talking about art and all the cool stories. It's awesome.
Lots of characters involved.
Oh, yeah. What grades are you teaching?
I teach 9 through 12.
Oh, wow. Tip of the hat to you.
It's my favorite grade level, actually.
Good.
I would imagine because art is typically an elective for kids. They don't have to take it. So they probably want to be in your classroom, I'm guessing, as opposed to I got to go to
Washington State. They have to take at least one full credit of art. They can do my class, they can do choir, band, drama, and then they also have elective. So then they can choose my class or they can choose some other elective, like we have culinary. And so some of them, they don't really want to be there, but then they still enjoy themselves.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm like conjuring up my high school art classroom right now, and there's just good memories all around. When you started getting interested in art and creating art in college, were you already into horror and those things meld together quickly, or how did the horror stuff happen?
I've always been into horror movies and monster movies I always say this, since I was born. My mom has always, like Halloween was always a big time of year for us, do all the decorations and things like that. My mom was always into the Universal monsters, so she got me into, and my art has always been a little bit on the darker side. And then I'm drawn to painting monsters. And then now more recently, I've been doing some work more focused on my mental illness struggles that I've been through. So it's been really good to do that. But then also still going back to doing my portraits that I like to do.
How much of the horror side do you share with your students?
All of it. Like you should see my classroom. It is literally wall to wall Halloween monster posters.
Cool.
Monster toys.
Awesome.
I have over 150 Frankenstein's monster toys.
I'd want to come to your class, even if it wasn't like you weren't my teacher. I'd
Right.
be like, I want to
Yeah.
go and see the.
Dude, it's insane. And just, it's so cool because my school and my district, they're just accepting of me being like the weirdo teacher. Because I think every school needs that weird art teacher. And I dress wearing monster shirts and horror shirts and Halloween leggings all year round. And it's just showing the kids that it's okay to be yourself, when it's okay to be weird.
What is it about Frankenstein's monster that you're so drawn to?
I think part of it is like the sadness that he has. Like he didn't choose to be created that way. And then, he's just very misunderstood. And like with my own struggles, I mean, there's this quote that one of my favorite podcasters, Marcus Parks, says is that like mental illness isn't your fault, but it's your responsibility to take care of it. And so for a long time, am I broken? Am I crazy? When you struggle with severe depression and anxiety and all the things that come with it, can put you in this really dark place. So it's like when you can connect with even just a fictional character. I mean, I know to people that aren't, like you said, aren't into horror and stuff, it sounds silly, but I think we all need things like little lifelines that we can look to and connect with when, let's say, like people in your day-to-day life have no idea what it's like. Like if they can sympathize, but a lot of times they can't empathize with what it's like to be suicidal or have a lot of super dark thoughts and just feeling like you're drowning. It's hard to explain to someone that heaviness. To be able to find comfort somewhere is really great.
For sure, yeah. It really is impossible, I think, to explain to people unless they have experienced it themselves what heavy anxiety is, being on the verge of a panic attack for, and you can tell yourself whatever you're thinking about is so silly, but that doesn't change the way your brain is.
Oh, dude. Oh, I know. I've obsessed about things. I have OCD too. So I've obsessed so much about one thing that it made my head hurt. And people are like, oh, it's no big deal. It's like my head thinks it's a big deal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Doing all those, I think it's like DBT things where you like splash cold water in your face and all this stuff and kind of distract. But it's just, I have such severe anxiety that like my body hurts sometimes. Like my chest hurts. I've had to wear like heating pads, like under my clothes just from anxiety. It's hard to explain to people feeling.
It
Yeah.
is. Because I have anxiety and it seems to have come on, in the last 10 years for me. I don't think anybody could have explained to me what I was going to be feeling. And we haven't talked about this much on the podcast, but I'm in my 50s and I came from an era where we just didn't talk about things the way that it's becoming acceptable to talk about them. So I'm happy about that. To your point, children, and especially at that critical high school age, they need what you're giving them. They need that safe space.
I always say it's sort of like my suffering that I've done. It's like it can help them. all these different tips, tricks, or if they just need someone to talk to. Or a lot of times, like I'm very like empathic. It's the thing that helps me a lot with anxiety is to know when someone's upset or depressed. So then like, I can come up to them and be like, "Are you okay?" And they're, "How did you know?" I just knew that you're feeling better, stuff like that. Yeah, it is a very critical age. And even remember when I was a kid, I didn't know what anxiety was. I just thought it was like I was nervous. It's just something that you really talk about. And I feel like we're still in dark ages of mental health awareness and understanding because, yeah, it's like something you don't talk about. And it's like, oh, you're weak if you let that bother you. I'm sorry, like I went through something super traumatic and I have PTSD and you just don't understand, but it's not about letting things bother you. It's about trying to work through them and stuff.
There's definitely a pinhole of light coming through now. Thank goodness.
Yes.
I think that hole is getting a little bit bigger every day. And we're just seeing that through people that we've been talking through on this podcast. It's just, I think everybody's experiencing something. Now, horror might not be their outlet, but for us, people that grew up feeling like outsiders and misfits and that sort of thing, like that's where we fit in.
Exactly. And I was just that kid at school that I was so shy. I didn't talk to anyone. And it's funny, like I hated school so much, but yet I'm a teacher. It's totally different on the opposite side. But, I just sit and just read Stephen King books and just really try to just get into a different world because I was just so depressed and I didn't really understand depression, but I was severely depressed and just had so much anxiety that just being able to escape to a different world, like through a book or horror movies and things like that, just it takes away from what you're going through at the moment.
Yeah, I think just like with our other podcast, Family Twist, it's interesting how we find these similarities. And maybe it's just because we're all into the horror culture, but I would say of the dozen interviews we've done so far, most people talk about the VHS days, going to the video store and going right to the horror section and looking at all the cool boxes and either a parent or a sibling or a friend introducing them to horror. Probably a little too early, but we share so much. And we had a couple people when we were just talking about creating this. I think you're going to run out of guests pretty quickly. And I'm thinking, no, we're going to have 3 years worth of guests booked almost immediately.
It's crazy. Yeah. The horror community, especially like on Instagram it's vast. It's so vast. And there's so many great people on there. And it's just such a welcoming, like loving community. Like ever since I discovered it 7 or 8 years ago, it's been so awesome because I always say like in real life, quote unquote, like there's not a lot of like monster kids. So to me, the term is like you've loved monsters since you were a kid. And so it's hard to find those weirdos in real life. And I use the term weirdo in a good way because some people are like, oh, don't call yourself weird. But I am weird and I own that and I love it about myself. But yeah, it's hard to find the other weirdos in real life. So yeah, it's been fantastic.
I had no idea what the East Coast horror convention scene was like before we moved here because we were living in California for such a long time. And so I would go down to Southern California a couple of times a year to go to a con. And there was a great one up in Sacramento. And then we moved here. And it's even before we moved here, the first time we came out to visit and meet Kendall's family, guess what? There happened to be a horror convention going on in Massachusetts that weekend. And we took the family to the horror con.
Who had never been.
That never experienced anything.
Yeah.
And it's just great. Like you didn't share something that we're passionate about with brand new family.
Yeah.
And then it just turned out that Kendall's half sister, Monica, loves horror. She's a great artist. So it's like those things. Oh, okay. We can immediately bond over.
I know. I love like sharing with my kids. And it's like when they put a classic horror movie in the theaters, like thing, I'm like, let's go, so it's so fun. I took him to see The Exorcist, but it's just to me, like those movies are so important. And so it's just, I love doing that. And then it's cool to introduce horror movies, certain ones maybe to people who've seen and watch their reaction where they don't know what's going to happen and things like that. It's just, yeah, it's real exciting.
And I think because there are people that'll say, oh, I can't watch that. It's too scary. It's like, well, there are milder ones too. It can ease you into the water.
Right, right.
You don't have to go immediately to The Exorcist.
You can start off with Gremlins or something like that, which,
Yeah. To me, I love a good demonic possession. That's like my favorite.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's one of the things that in horror movies scares me the most.
Yep. I love it. It's just, I don't know what it is about it, but that's my favorite genre.
I guess maybe it's the most realistic supernatural thing that could actually happen, just because it's been discussed for hundreds of years and across all religions and that sort of things. Whereas we have not stumbled upon a real vampire yet.
No.
We have not. Godzilla has not trampled the streets yet.
I know, like, to me, The Exorcist is my number one scary movie. To me, that's the scariest movie I've ever seen. I still, like, if I watch it right before bed, I'm not sleeping, and then to see her and to have her face so, because the master, Dick Smith, like, his makeup was just so incredible that it's like, you believe it, she's possessed. It's also that loss of control that's very scary, and because I'm really into, like, UFOs and aliens and stuff. So, like, the thought of, like, alien abduction, it's like where you are in possession, like, you're taken against your will and you're just lost. And that's like with depression and stuff. You didn't ask for it, and it's just, you're taken away.
I completely agree. I think there are a lot of parallels that can be drawn to that analogy.
And that's definitely, it's hard for me to say a favorite, but that's definitely one that I could watch over and over again.
And we have.
And we do, yes. But what's interesting is I think the first time I saw it, I was probably relating more to Reagan and the situation that she was in and being terrified that could possibly happen to me. And then as you get older, then you start to relate more to her mother and the priest who's struggling with his mother getting older. And it's just like, there's so many different facets. It's such a brilliant movie and book. And
oh yeah, to me, it's one of my top scary books too. It's like top 3.
And I'm from St. Louis, so it's like I grew up hearing the stories about what really happened. And my great uncle was a Jesuit priest, and he was able to put me in touch with the Jesuit students who assisted with the boy when they were doing the exorcism.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah.
That's when the journalism really helps, huh?
Yeah. He was a good connection to have because he was on a bunch of boards and things like that, very well respected in St. Louis. So that was,
Not the boy, his great
Not the
uncle.
boy. Yeah. No, I think they finally revealed the identity of the boy. He is now past the man. But thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Horror Heals. Audrey Rose has shown us how horror can be a way to embrace our unique quirks and even find a kind of therapy within it. If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with friends who'd love our take on horror and mental wellness. And heads up, we're not done with Audrey just yet. Stay tuned for part 2, where she shares even more about her creative journey and life in horror. Until next time, remember, horror is good for mental wellness? Of course it is. The Horror Heals podcast is produced and presented by How the Cow Ate the Cabbage, LLC.